And
She
member
is here.
Riker.
She might be on mute. She's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there
I'm
she
here.
is. Okay.
I'm here.
And member Rikers.
Here.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Good. All right. So we have a quorum, and then I will guess we will go right into public comment.
This is Paula Joe. I don't know if this is the time or if you want me to wait for someone else, but I had a question to the committee.
Okay. So did we have anybody register for public comment, Hitesh or Jess, or should?
Do we have it, Jess?
Nobody officially signed up, but whoever is on the phone now can start.
Okay.
Comment.
Sure. So, and I'm sorry, who joined with the comment? I'm sorry, I didn't hear who it was.
Paula Jacoby.
Okay. All right, Paula.
And also,
And
we also have Trish Connolly has her hand raised.
Okay. All right. So, Paula, please proceed.
Sure, and I apologize. I didn't realize we needed to register in advance. I just found
No,
out
you don't.
today.
You don't. It's just that
Okay.
that would be who we
Right.
start with if someone did notify beforehand. Please.
I got it. I wanted to address, if I could, and ask, frankly, the Finance and Budget Committee and the aldermen to look into, when I was gone for a couple of weeks, came back and saw a lot in the roundtable and other places about Fleetwood Jordan perhaps being on the chopping block, so to speak, is being torn down. And I know that this relates to the school boards having approved a new school for the 5th Ward. And I don't think that necessitates knocking down a facility that's really serving a lot of purposes right now that I know firsthand. But it also seems like if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I really was, whether I support or don't support the school, and I don't have enough information to say otherwise, other than I know enrollment's been going down. I do know from firsthand the good that Fleetwood Jordan is doing. It's a place I work out with. There was a lot of other of my friends, but this summer when I was also putting together a new sports program, I worked with Family Focus, who uses those tennis courts. I met with Brianna Jenkins, who I know does the summer camp there. I have seen how used the center is. I know that they do a warming center in the winters. I know that this is one of the maybe only places in Evanston that has a free lunch and free breakfast for kids in the area. I know they've got their gardens going. I mean, I've just seen firsthand that this is, it appears to me, not only well used by the community, really an asset. And I know the city has put money into the facility that exists already over the last several years. They've done a big upgrade to the HVAC. They've done a lot on the basketball court and even in the gym itself. And I've just seen, real rehabs going on, and that's already money that has been spent. And it would seem very sad that to take away a center, even for a year to rebuild it, when it functions extremely well as it does and serves the community well, and is really doing things that others don't. So I know that Evanston is not made of money, and we have our own budget issues. So it just seems to me somebody needs to really look at this part of the, I don't want it to just be the fallout from a new school that you take away something that's good.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And next, Jess. Yep.
Tricia.
Hi, I'm Tricia Conley, 2nd Ward. I just tonight wanted to check in on a couple of things. First of all, I'd really like to acknowledge and thank the committee for taking a historic step and recommending to the council to fully fund our police and fire pensions this year. Historic because I don't think this has ever been done before. And so I really want you to take pride in making that happen or helping us make that happen. On another note, I'd respectfully ask Mr. Livingston to consider stepping down as chair. You know, this was a unanimous vote by all you folks, and I was there for your meeting where you did vote, and it was discussed. You know, a lot of stuff got brought up that night. I was there. There were other people there. And so it was quite surprising to me the day before the city council meeting that Mayor Biss pulled out a email from Mr. Livingston suggesting that he didn't think it was a good idea to fully fund and that, you know, there would be problems with this. And it really undermined, it had the potential of undermining what you all said you recommended. And so I see this as an abuse of power as a chair. And I would just simply ask that, you know, he really consider stepping down in that position. I look forward to more impactful work on this committee going forward and appreciate you being stewards of Evanston's future financial decisions. So thank you for that. Thanks for letting me speak.
All right. Jess,
Sure.
who do we have next?
We have Mary Rosinski next.
All right.
Hi, this is Mary Rosinski, and I agree with Trish, and thank you guys for doing this and funding the budget. You know, we got to get ahead of our debt in this city if we're going to be viable and let people stay here. But I most would like to see us have a moratorium on major projects, because we just last year, or this year in September, saw a capital improvement projection of $123 million, and Fleetwood wasn't even mentioned in it. And now we, you know, as someone said earlier, we've spent, I think it's closer to $1 million on Fleetwood in the last couple of years, because I think it was 600 for the floor and 200 for the carpet or something, in addition to HVAC. But I don't want to see a project for the school, which is, you know, if they can pull that off and meet what they promised the residents, I think it's great. But then the city shouldn't be dragged into an unnecessary $30 to $50 million project. In other communities, when people are doing these types of projects, this is a community-wide discussion and planning process, not something that came up last night as well. The school needs to move quickly, so therefore so does the city. That's the tail wagging the dog. The project for the school is the school. The project for the city needs the city to be responsible. And if we don't have enough money to maintain our current buildings, then we certainly don't have enough money to be tearing down a perfectly good community center and getting ourselves into greater debt. And when we're not even paying our pension. So that's, I just feel like, I hope you guys continue to do the good work you've been doing and help the city get on track. And this is not an endless gift basket from the residents to produce tax dollars for these unnecessary projects. It's really disconcerting to me, and it's going to be hard for people who are coming into Evanston to buy all this nonsense. So I'm fear that we will see people going to other communities where things are run a little bit more transparent and reasonably. Okay, so thank you very much for your time.
Very good. Thank you. Jess, do we have anyone else for public comment?
I believe that was it. Public comment.
Okay, very good. All right, so the next point is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes?
I
will
will
move.
second.
Okay, very good. So can we vote on the minutes?
Councilmember Nguyen,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns, Councilmember
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Committee Chair,
Aye.
Committee Member McMillan,
Aye.
and Committee Member Rikus.
Aye.
Chair, if I may have a moment of personal privilege.
Sure.
I just want to I read the email that you sent to council, and you clearly stated that you're speaking in your personal capacity.
Mhm.
And I just don't think that, if you're serving as chair of a committee, that you give up your right as a citizen to share your own personal opinion. And so I just want to make sure that the community understands. I get the concern, but
Yeah.
you spoke in your personal capacity. And I think that needs to be made clear.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Reed. I appreciate that.
I'll echo that and say thank you, David, for serving in this capacity. Public service can be a thankless task, and I hope you continue to do so.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Newsma. All right. Right. So if I could, so we'll move on with the agenda at this point. And congratulations on passing the budget last night. If I could just say one thing, and I think I've reached out to several of you. And consistent with the comments from prior meetings, I very much support getting to 100% funding. My only concern with respect to this was, at least in the first year, and we do have available excess reserves to do this in the first year, but it was not backed by any revenue sources. That's your prerogative. I will just say it's going to create, additional work for us as we roll forward, but we'll continue to do that. So I think it's definitely a good move to make the contribution. We just continue to need to advance these 5 points that we'll discuss later, and I think as we make progress on those 5 points, a lot of the issues that came up in this budget will just be better understood and better known as we go into the next year budget. And part of that is better forecasting on revenue streams and cost streams, and that, if there had been more revenue this year, it would change some of the lines, revenue lines going forward, but we will just continue to make work. We do have the available reserves, and so be it, and we'll move forward. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it has to be stated that had we not fully funded, our debt would only have increased, and that this is really putting us on the right path finally to acting responsibly. I think we should no longer be making fully funding our pensions a political football. This needs to be an integral part of our budget. We can make other items that aren't necessary political footballs about whether or not we raise the levy for those, but this should not be funding. Our public safety pension should not be made a political football. This needs to become a regular part, a regular line item, and we can decide how we do that, whether it's from continuing to fund at 90% with a levy and using the PPRT tax to bridge that gap, or however we get there. But I think it's time to, bring to an end the, creating politicizing the funding of something that we have a contractual obligation to. And we can make, we can talk about raising levy for other projects. I think that's really important. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to the discussions on finance and budget about how we want to do that, if we want to continue at 90%, and what would be the other sources to continue to fully fund our pension obligations with our public safety staff. Thank you.
Just point of order. Sorry, Chair. I'm going to call for the order of the day. My apologies. I didn't mean to derail us here. I just wanted to, I know what it's like to have misconceptions about what you said or what you're doing out there, and I just wanted to set the record straight. So I'm going to move for the order of the day.
Okay. Very, very good. Very good. All right. So our next subject was, I believe, it was our, sorry.
Chair,
I don't have.
I'm just looking at the agenda. The next subject is our calendar.
The calendar. Let's go there.
But if I can request you to have, we have Lara Biggs here as a part of a budget discussion, particularly on the project side, and she has the next meeting in half an hour. So I would request that we kind of at least hear from what Lara has to say. And if you have more questions, leave it for me in terms of funding and when financed and bond. But at least on the front end, if we can have that kind of before she can leave for the next meeting.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I'll move item 4C, which is the GO bonds for the CIP projects, and I guess that's what Lara's here for.
Second.
Very good. Okay. All right. Ms. Biggs.
Sorry about that. My name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer for Evanston. Hitesh asked me to provide an update on the spending of the GO bond issues. There is a little bit of confusion because some of the 2022 GO bond issue rolled over into the 2023 budget. There are actually three components of money that's been budgeted and or spent for the 2022 GO bond issue. The first is projects that we have actually gone to city council and gotten approved contracts to spend the money. And so those projects are under contract per the resolution that was passed at the beginning of 2022 that allowed us to spend against the GO bond issue. So we have spent approximately $4 million of the GO bond issue as contracts that are already in place. The second group is a group of projects that we anticipated back in July when I prepared the budget. We anticipated to have in place by the end of the year, but for whatever reason, there have been delays. So they're not shown as rolling over into the 2023 budget. They are expected to be in place in the next month or two. And those contracts is approximately $1.5 million of contracts, including items such as the skate park that we thought we would have under contract by the end of the year, but we will have under contract shortly. And then the third is those items that we knew were not going to be under contract by the end of the year and are rolled over into the 2023 budget. That is approximately $3.7 million of contracts that are shown as part of the 2023 budget, but using 2022 funding. So altogether, right now, we would be using about $9.2 million of the proposed 2022 general obligation bonds. And what was shown in the resolution was actually a bit more. It was 10.9 million. So it's a reduction of what was originally proposed for the 2022 GO bonds based on actual costs of projects that have come in lower. Some projects have just been canceled or gone away. And so I just wanted to make it clear that for the 2022 GO bonds, staff is currently anticipating spending $9.2 million of the original proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Biggs on that? I have one for Mr. Desai as with respect to this. Okay, so Mr. Desai, as you know, we did not do a bond issue last year, given the turbulence in the financial markets, which have, at least on the long end of the bond market, some of those of rates have dropped from last fall, which is good. But with respect to the GO bonds or just bonding in general, we wanted to get your sense of, given where the city is with respect to cash reserves, when do you anticipate that we would need to go to market with a bond issuance?
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the question.
So I mean, it depends on so many factors. I mean, variety of. One good thing is, let's start with the good things. Property tax money has started coming in, as most of you have received the bills, and so a lot of the payments from commercial side, they generally come right away. So yeah, we have seen some kind of so that would be great. So. And so far, I haven't used any kind of money or borrowed any money, the city, for our in lieu of property tax gap. So that's a good thing. So, and I'm not going to need any money out of the line of credit for the property tax because it's already there now coming. And in the month and a half, I think we will get the entire installment. And then within 2 or 3 months, again, we would have hopefully the Cook County is on on schedule, and we would have our first installment money rolling out in March 1st. So we are fine there. Since we did not issue 2022 GEO bonds, and we kind of used our cash reserve, even though those money were sitting assigned for certain projects. But as we know, when we issue the bond and we go out with the project and engineering and the project completed, we get the bill and finally cash goes out. So we had that kind of window, which we are using right now. As Lara said, that she has already spent $4 million of 22 GEO bond issue. And again, let's clarify, we haven't issued the bonds, but this was intended to be funded out of 22. Where did that $4 million come from? The existing cash of around $9 or $10 million in CIP. Couple of big payments are outstanding to IDOT. We just received the email from Lara Biggs staff, Jonathan Silverstein, that says that we are expected to pay around $6 to $7 million to IDOT, and we hope to have those bills in the early spring. And so our cash balance would go down. We looked at these projects which were completed, so we booked the expense for that required under the accounting rules. Even though we don't receive the invoice for 6 months or 6 years, we have to book the expense if the project is completed. So the CIP fund balance right now is only around $3 million. Cash is $10 million because, yes, the expense is booked, but we are still sitting on the cash. In terms of market, we are looking at like 6-8 weeks ago when we asked our financial advisor, the rate was around 4.45. I mean, after that, we had a one rate increase, one more expected this month, maybe 50 basis points. So, yes, I don't think it's the right thing to go out in the market. So what is our alternative? That we will continue to kind of tap into our reserves and even use where permissible, like say general fund cash, and give it as a loan to the CIP fund. In terms of our line of credit, the current rate would be 5% if I use that. And that would be obviously a short-term kind of a mechanism to use that thing. So this is like kind of keeping an eye, and day in, day out, we see where we are. I'm constantly like talking to Lara and her team in terms of where they are, what kind of cash flow they would need. Are there any bills expected, particularly from IDOT, of around $6 to $7 million? And we will continue to update.
How much are you earning on cash?
The earning on cash, it depends. We are investing in some of this. We just invested in 4.85%. Our bank accounts are earning around 3.75.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I have like over 300,000 right now in investment income every month. So I mean, it's a youth thing, but it hurts on the debt side.
Yeah. All right. So Council Member Kelly, you have your hand raised.
So
and I think you're on.
Yeah, thank you. So before issuing any bonds, the 5% rate, what are the date parameters you're referencing that rate at? Are you referring to now or what?
The 5%, which I said, would be the rate as of now for the line of credit. Yeah, as of today.
It's still in 22. That will likely go up in 23. So I guess I would want a full accounting of the fund balances, not just, I know you said in the general fund we have a fund balance of $45 million. I'd like a fund balance of I think there's 9 other funds, and I know we keep reserves. Can we get a fund balance of the other 9 funds also, like motor fuel tax and everything else? Because I think it's really important that we see where we stand in those, and if in how that money is assigned or planned to be assigned before we decide whether or not we really need to issue a bond.
So the fund balance and cash balance, I mean, Councilmember Kelly, they are there every monthly report. You go on the website, we have the October report there. Next week, we would have November report out there. So you would see both the numbers.
Okay, what are the numbers for the other? So I know it's $45.5 million for the general fund. that's the fund balance. How about for the other, is it 9 or 8 other funds? I think it's 9 other funds.
I mean, if you are talking about the motor fuel tax, I cannot use the motor fuel tax.
Not just the motor fuel, but all of the funds. We keep a reserve, and I think a lot of the members on this
right. So, I mean, there is, I mean, you can look at it and.
I'm sorry, some of them we keep even a 25% reserve. But I think that's focus on the general fund, of course, because it's the largest. But I think we need to understand that we have fund balances and surplus balances in other funds also.
Right. But I don't think there are other funds where I can draw the money from because of the restriction imposed because of that type of the thing. As I said, TIF funds, special service area funds, I cannot tap into that. I cannot tap into the MFT fund. I can. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at it and you can specifically.
Well, I just think it's important that we be upfront and disclose to both the Finance and Budget Committee and to the Council as to the fund balances in those other funds. And I think obviously we can, as a council, vote if we need to transfer funds. That is up to us. We can, in some of those, do that. So I think it's really important that we're completely privy that there's total transparency about fund balances in every single fund. Thank you.
Again, I mean, let me just clarify for the Chair Livingston and the council member.
Please.
We have financials there on the website every month with the fund balance and cash balance. If you go now, you would see up to October. In the next week, you would see the November. So,
right, and you don't have a year-end projection. You had a year-end projection for the general fund at 45.5 million, but you have not yet provided a year-end projection on fund balances for the other 9 funds.
I thought we provided, didn't we, Clayton, as a part of the budget memo? Or
part of the budget.
At the November 21st City Council meeting, we included the list of 32 funds with projected fund balances at the end of this year and at the end of next year. And you shared that like that day before the meeting. I think it was like the meeting right after Thanksgiving, actually. So it was the November 28th meeting where we shared that list.
All right. So Councilmember Newsma, I do think we have an agenda item for our next meeting, would be to clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think what Councilmember Kelly is asking for is a good segue into item 4B on our agenda, kind of revisiting our work plan. And one of those components is regular financial reporting. So I think we're going to start to, we're going to continue that conversation when we get to it on the agenda later this evening.
Very good. On this question on bonding, I would also say that the interest rates are very, the market is very unique right now, and that long-term rates are lower than short-term rates. And I presume that also carries over into the municipal market. I think in January it would be good to have our bond advisor here and say, look, these are the rates that this is what we would recommend that you do if you were to issue bonds in the short term. But also we need your guidance on, given our liquidity, although rates have dropped, the rates are still higher than they would have been a year ago. But given our available liquidity through the credit facility or the line of credit and available reserves, when are you thinking we would likely need, with current forecasts, to reapproach the bond market? When will our liquidity really necessitate that we think about issuing a bond, and what would that look like? I think those would be excellent points to bring up in the next meeting, and possibly, if long-term rates are shorter than or lower than short-term rates, which they certainly are today, how do we take advantage of that? Right, and maybe it's more.
The other thing I would love to understand. Yes, apologies, I can't raise my hand, but the other thing, Atesh, I would love to have a better understanding is how these IDOT, when you say you've heard from IDOT, what does that really mean? Is it
not the heard. Not the heard means. I mean, we asked our engineering staff that in terms of, so they might be reaching out to I assume that IDOT staff, and Lara can talk to more, but this is the email which we got from the engineering. That we might receive the invoices in next 3 to 6 months worth around $5.5 to $6 million. Again, I mean, they have qualified their thing that yes, I mean, IDOT billing, we do not control that. It could come in 3 months.
No, I understand that, but I don't know what that means by we might receive.
I mean, Lara, you want to kind of chime in anymore then?
Sure. So IDOT when we have a federally funded contract, IDOT administers the construction of the contract, and the federal funds that we get as grants go to IDOT. Usually we have matching funds and they bill us periodically through the contract for the matching funds. But as we get to the end of the contract, there's a big chunk of money that they have not billed us for yet. And once the contractor stops working, that's when they do all of the paperwork to review the final submittals, make sure that all of the quantities are calculated correctly, et cetera. And while in a perfect world, they would do that over a couple month period and then issue a final cost of contract to us, they are extremely short staffed. In fact, they use consultants for quite a lot of this work. And often this piece of work will languish for years. It is not uncommon for 4 years to go by and we never get the final bill for the contract. Then periodically, IDOT all of a sudden gets energized. They get flack from the state budget office or what. I'm not entirely sure what causes this, but we will see a flurry of activity to finalize bills. And we are seeing that. They have recently finalized a couple of smaller contracts, but one contract in particular, the Sheridan Road bike lane contract, has a huge outstanding balance, and we haven't seen the final bill for that. So this is typical.
So is this something that you're saying to me, all municipalities struggle with is budgeting for IDOT? Nobody can do that.
If they receive federal funding for any of their contracts, then yes, they do.
I can speak on that point too, just briefly. It was the same case where I came from previously as well. We had probably $12 million on our book for IDOTs. I think the oldest one was a project that was completed in 2011, where we were still waiting on invoices. So they are notoriously slow for
and then, thank you, Clayton, and thank you, Laura. One other clarifying question, Tesh. When you said, how much did you say of our cash is invested at 3.75?
That is the lowest rate. Everything is invested at 3.7 or higher.
So all of our cash is invested.
Yeah, this is the checking account balances. Otherwise, we have invested in 4.5%, 5%.
Right. Member Rikus,
I do have one point of. I'm sorry. I have one point of clarification to something Councilmember Kelly mentioned about transferring balances to other funds. I'm not an expert on all of our funds, but MFT can only be spent with the express permission of IDOT. So if it would actually be illegal for us to spend that money unless it is spent and approved by IDOT. That is just how motor fuel tax works.
Sure, that's one fund. I was referencing not total 10 points. So, and by the way, does anybody know why? I know Councilmember Reed passed a motion to add 1 cent per gallon to the motor fuel tax fund, but that wasn't included in our budget. I know it won't generate a lot, but nevertheless, I'm going to assume that's $100,000 to $200,000 of additional revenue that was not included in the budget. Can somebody tell me why that was taken off our agenda?
I would let any council member speak, or they are council member Reed.
Yeah, I spoke with, thank you for raising that, Councilmember Kelly, and bringing that to our attention. I spoke with Mayor Biss yesterday about that. He pulled it from the agenda. It's something I think this council is still interested in moving forward with, in alignment with our CARP goals. It was Mayor Biss's decision to pull it.
Okay. Member Rikus, I think you've had your hand up. Member Rikus.
Yeah, I have a couple quick things. One is, luckily we didn't do luckily or not luckily, but it's been nice that we haven't paid the interest the last 6 or 9 months because we didn't do the bond. But is there, and I know Chair Livingston has asked, but is there possible to really get a timeline of cash flow in and cash flow out so we can really see when and if we need to do the bonds as opposed to let's just do a bond? That would be very helpful. And the other thing that, and again, I haven't been to all the council meetings, but I keep hearing about these excess reserves. And I feel that we are, I know we spent some for the pension. Is there a way at the next meeting we can get a reconciliation of that and what's left of the excess reserves? Because maybe we don't have to do a bond if there is some of that. So I just get the numbers are flying around, and I just want to make sure we have all those numbers to make a decision.
Yeah, I agree. Councilmember Kelly, and then I think we can move on to the discussion of the calendar, or Councilmember Reed as well.
And just one more thing. One more thing, Natasha. Is there any way you could also break out for us what our cash reserves are and how much is invested at any given rate?
Yeah.
The 375 versus the 4 versus the 5.
Yes.
That'd be great.
And there
Thank
are short-term treasuries right now paying over 4. So I don't
was
know
thinking about that.
if we want to,
Chair,
like a 3-month.
I mean, the highest we have invested is one, I think, at 505.
Oh, that's good.
But it has a call, but we have invested in some bullets which are making 4.75, 4.7.
That's a lot better.
to know what that looks like.
So I think Councilmember Reed has had his hand up for a while. Then we'll go to Councilmember Kelly, and then maybe we can wrap up this part of the discussion.
I just had a point of information because I didn't do a great job of explaining. I just said Mayor Biss pulled it. It's because it required an ordinance change for the motor fuel tax. And we didn't have the ordinance ready, and we passed as just a budget amendment, but not with an ordinance prepared that went through referral. So I just want to clarify, so it's not just saying Mayor Biss is somebody who just pulled it for no reason. And then lastly, I just also want to note to Laura's point about, not that the conversation is really about motor fuel tax, but also that those funds, transportation related funds by state law, have to be spent on transportation related expenditures. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay. And then Councilmember.
Thank you.
Yeah, granted, yes, I know, and I agree. I mean, of course, regarding the motor fuel tax, nevertheless, transparency is important. Whether it's in a fund that cannot be, transferred to other funds, we still need to know the bottom line in terms of surplus and where we stand with the motor fuel tax. But more importantly, regarding every fund. So I have two questions, I guess. One, I think that regarding IDOT, we have to be careful. It sounds like we're just making contracts without budgeting it. I mean, obviously, when we make an agreement with IDOT, we budget it, whether it's through bonds, through levy or whatever. So it sounds like, oh, we're going to get an IDOT bill, and we don't know where we're going to get the money, but we got to have money ready. And I think it's really important that we always are very clear on how much did we assign for that, and from what did we assign it, from what year, from what bond, et cetera. There just has to be more transparency and clarity around all of our funds and how they're assigned. And then I had one other question, just because I'm getting a lot of people asking me about this as we discuss pensions. Fortunately, it's really wonderful that the public has become more informed and educated about our debt. And folks have been asking me, why didn't we do what Skokie did when they took, when it was under 2%, they refinanced, they basically bonded out their pension deficit at under 2%. And they're saying, why didn't Evanston do that? So I wonder if you could just kind of just for the public, if you could explain why we didn't take advantage of that moment also. Thank you.
Let's just talk about the, do you want me to go and
I think if I could say, I think that, look, we have a work plan for pensions, and sort of should we or should we have not done what Skokie did is probably a very complex question to answer. So I don't know if now is the right time to really get into a comparison of, after the fact, should we have done something like Skokie did with a pension borrowing or not? The fact is, we didn't. Those rates are gone, but also the stock market is substantially down this year. So it would be, there's probably a lot of things to consider. Experts we could talk to about the advisability of doing a large debt offering, which then you have to pay in the future as well, right? It's not like you funded it. You've just taken out bonds that you then have to repay. So I think there's a lot of plus and minuses about whether you should do so it's a complex question that we could delve into. And I think as part of this work plan that we're talking about on pensions, we could reevaluate. Do we miss an opportunity? Is this something we should look at? But that's a very complex
Sure. Thank you,
item.
Chair Livingston. I agree with you, and I don't even know necessarily where I stand. I generally, the opinion that we're paying at a greater rate now than we would have, that boat has sailed. I agree. So, but I do think, nevertheless, we need to understand history so that we can move forward appropriately with best practices. So I just think it's important that at some point, it doesn't have to be tonight, but I think we should look at that and why that decision was made, or if it was just overlooked, we should also address that. Thank you.
Or if it was advisable. I mean, aside from what has happened in the interim, right? I think there's a lot of thought about whether that sort of funding mechanism for pensions is the right thing to do. So
we do track the general bond issues and how they're spent. And one of the reasons why we keep calling it the 2022 general obligation bond issue is because that's how it's tied to the budget and that's how it's tracked. So even if that bond money gets sold in 2023, we would continue to call it the 2022 general obligation bond issue. So I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that we're not tracking the bond issues and how they're getting spent. We actually have to report them fairly regularly when we go to sell new bonds.
And it sounds like the issue with IDOT is just lack of visibility from them on when they're going to ask for reimbursement from us. That's the issue?
That is the issue. And I don't think that they enjoy that that's the situation they're in. I think they have something like 500 positions open statewide. So you can imagine they're a little short-staffed. They try to make that up with consultants. And we could argue if the state of Illinois is governing themselves appropriately or not, but it's the situation that IDOT is in. And so that's what we get handed.
All right. Very good.
And just one thing I added, I think, Lara, and you can correct me. I saw your email, I think, last year in response to some of the council member requests that you identify each project and match it with our total fund balance in the CIP fund. This 10 million or 11 million is kind of technically, earmarked for these projects. It could be an 18 project, it could be a 2019 project, 2020. So that's, in that sense, those money is earmarked for the projects which were approved by the council in some years. And that's why it's a good point that in 22, Lara has already spent $4 million of money on the projects approved by the council, but we haven't received the money. We will continue to kind of discuss this thing at the council level every month at the finance budget, where we are in terms of the interest rate environment. What is our cash balance? What is our situation with the IDOT? Because that would be a big kind of impact, and we'll continue to update you.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay, if you don't mind, maybe can we get back? Claire, you have your hand raised, but I wonder if we could get back to the agenda on the next meetings. I think it sounds like we have very much in January. We'd like to understand. Maybe look at what the fund balances are, where we think the end of the year, where we landed, but also which of those are movable between funds roughly, but also based on where we are with cash flow. We'll get more property tax money at the beginning of the year. What came in? When do we think we should be thinking about doing a bond issuance? And if it's anytime soon, we should talk. Maybe bring the advisor in and get some of their views on how our municipalities thinking about bond issuances in the current environment. It's been good. We've been able to delay for 6 months or so, but that's not, we will have to do a bond issue at some point.
So I just,
Councilmember Kelly.
I just want to say,
I had a say
okay,
something
go
too.
ahead.
Oh, I know we're going through the schedule. I travel a lot and I revolve it around these meetings. So like I was home this week for in person. So is there a way we can identify if meetings will be in person or virtual ahead of time? That's just wanted to make that comment. So.
Got it. Okay. All right. Yes, we should. This one was requested to be, because of all the work's been done on the budget, there was a request that it be virtual, but I think our bias certainly now is to have them in person. So, all right. Anybody else? We can go to the schedule next. That's the next item on the agenda. If everybody is
Okay, so thank you, Lara.
Ready to move
Let
on?
me just,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Lara,
thank you,
for
Laura.
coming. Yeah.
Thank
at
you,
the last
Laura.
Okay. All right, so we have some proposed dates for our meetings next year. If there's any comments on those dates, I will note that one of them is on Valentine's Day. I don't know how that affects the broader group here, but at any rate, if there's any views on, do we go with these dates? Anybody have any concerns? I think the only one probably we need to lock in now would be January. So we could discuss them more, see if anybody has any issues with any of the dates between now and the next meeting. But if we just follow with the second Tuesday of the month, these would be the dates that we would use. And it sounds like, Tuesday might not be ideal because of the council meetings on Monday nights, but it's somewhat problematic.
I mean, I would just say this thing, Chair.
Other meetings to move them beyond Tuesday.
And Chair Livingston, just to I would be off. I'm out of the country for like a 2 weeks vacation, so I won't be there on January 10th. But I didn't want to kind of say that, okay, let's move everybody's schedule accordingly. So just to let you know, yeah. So if there's something outstanding which cannot happen, we can definitely cover in the February meeting.
Okay.
I just want to say that, sorry, Chair, that I really like the first or whatever Tuesday we meet, the first, second Tuesday, whatever it is. I serve on a lot of committees, and this is a pretty open period for me. So I prefer we keep at least the Tuesdays. We can move things around if we need, but Tuesday is a good day.
And I really think this is a question for the council members more than anyone, since they have the Monday night conflict. So I don't know if we need to approve these dates today, or we can take them under advisement for now and agree on them in January. I think it's really
Tuesdays work for me. I'm ready to approve the calendar.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I may have to be virtual now and then, but
I mean, anybody has any thoughts? Because I know Chair Livingston asked me to move the February 14th, and I said,
that's
let's
okay.
kind of
We don't
leave
have
it up to the
that.
council committee at
I'll
that
work on that
time.
one. So I think, do we have a motion, Sherry?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay. So to approve the dates on the attachment for our meetings for next year.
Can I add 2 more things for January to talk about?
Sure. Why don't we circle back to? I think we can come back after this meeting with the proposed agenda for January. Maybe that would be the best thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll have to also manage around what Mr. Desai just said relative to his availability in January, or him not being at the January 10th meeting. Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess, do we need to vote on the? We do. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't listed for action, but I think it's fine that we.
Fine. Okay.
Councilmember Wynn,
Yes.
Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Kelly.
Yep.
Councilmember Newsna.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Committee Chair Livingston.
Aye.
Committee Member McMillan.
Aye.
And Committee Member Rickes.
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Okay. The next item on our agenda, and this really goes back, I think if we had talked about over the summer, and I think an area that we just didn't have enough time to make real progress on were these areas of focus, these 5 areas. And I think, it was our first year. It took some time to identify the areas that I think were most important for us to be able to give better input and advice to the overall city council. But I think if everyone looks at those 5 areas of further work, I think the lack of clarity on all, had we made progress on these 5 areas, this entire budget process that everybody went through might have been substantially smoother than it was. And so acknowledging that, I believe that we should sort of rededicate ourselves to making progress on these 5 areas as soon as we can, or certainly in the first half of 23, in order to have a much more productive and have more issues identified and resolved going into the annual budget process, sort of have overall buy-in, better information, and it would make next year's process much simpler. So those were in the materials, but the areas are improving the presentation and timeliness of financial updates to the City Council, developing a better current year projection and longer term period projection model, pension analysis. And again, there was the incremental contribution, which is very good, but we're still lacking on the pension side some additional information. And that group would look at that in terms of what do we anticipate the payments are going to be going forward in order to achieve our 100% funding level by 2040. Also to look at debt planning, which we were just talking about, and then also talking about with Ms. Biggs, sort of capital budgeting. How do we think about what projects are the highest priority? How do we also think about repair and maintenance budgeting? So, and we had assigned people from this committee to sort of lead those 5 areas. And we also need to identify a person from the city side that a couple of people from this committee could work with on each one of these areas, so they could take ownership of their part of these five points, and we could make progress, talk about where the working groups are in selected meetings. And I really think that if we did have a much better understanding of these 5 points, the budget process will go much better next year. So I like to throw that up for discussion. I think one point is, are they the right 5 points? But also, how do we make additional progress? And maybe Mr. Desai could also come back and tell us who, I see that the city manager, Mr. Stowe, is on the line as well. Who should we be working with? And I think it needs to be, all roads can't go back to Mr. Desai, right? We need who's the right person to really have 2 people from this group work with, so that they can make progress on their individual areas. So I think that would substantially help. It would substantially help this year. Let's just make sure that we make progress this year, so the next year's budget process is simpler. So, Councilmember Newsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is an important conversation to have, and I completely agree that once we make progress on in these 5 areas, not only will the budget process go quicker or go smoother, just the monthly questions that seem to keep recurring about what about this number, what about that number, where's the money going, where's the money coming in, that's all going to be made more readily available, more digestible, and what might seem like lack of transparency is not that we're trying to hide any numbers. It's just that they're not presented in a digestible format. So I would like to, as a first step, work on the financial updates, it's fairly quick and straightforward, and I think can serve. If we do that properly, that will help the other conversations proceed from a point of having better information and being more fully informed. So it would be my preference to focus initially on the financial reporting within a month or 2, knock that one out, and then we can sink our teeth into some of the more meatier kind of policy issues.
Mm-hmm.
I concur.
Yeah, I agree. And Jonathan and you and I worked on the reporting.
Yeah.
But what I think happens is we have these initiatives, and there's so many other things to talk about. So one idea I was thinking about is maybe starting in February, and we say March is going to be pensions, April is going to be whatever it is. The meeting before, the committee will come up with questions and saying, if March is pensions, at the February meeting, what are the 4 questions that you guys have that you want us, who's leading that, to come back to? So I think I know we all probably work better with deadlines. So if we're assigned a month when we're going to present our particular area and we get the questions ahead of time, I think it would be really helpful.
All right. Member McMillan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I also want to talk about how are we going to communicate with council our recommendations? Because, you know, David, I do respect your ability, you know, as a private citizen to go out and say what you did to, you know, share with Daniel your personal views. But, you know, I shared mine, and you and I actually did have a conversation the night before you did send out that email, that, and I was in opposition. So I think we also need to say, you know, these are our recommendations, and we have to get behind those as a committee. I don't think we can have folks on the outside sort of saying, well, I, you know, disagree, so I'm just going to kind of put my stuff out there, because we are sort of the face of this. And I think we need to be mindful of that. So how do you, I mean, how will we be communicating this? Will we go and then have the subcommittees come to, you know, us as a committee, and then we approve it, and then we go to council? Or how's that going to look?
Right. I think we have to decide that point.
If I can just know.
I have an idea. Oh, what if we had one of our council people be the liaison? So we had Jonathan or Melissa at every meeting would say, this is what we discussed in the committee. This is their recommendation. It's almost like a format, and they would mention it at the meeting. So we would have one person be our liaison.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna...
And then is it that we're going to speak with one voice then?
We should speak with one voice if we vote on something. I was going to add it. We have 5 council members. I think 4 or 5 council members on this committee.
Right.
5. So I mean, we've got a majority of the council here already.
But no one
Not that we don't need
mentioned
to. Yeah, not that we don't need to have the. Yeah.
When we did the pension, we came up with a recommendation that we would fund up to 4.5 and levy up to a certain percent. And that I don't believe any of the councilmen mentioned that recommendation at the meeting, unless
I
I'm
have to
wrong.
say, I did over and over again, only to counter the impression that Chair Livingston was giving to the public. Even though, yes, although you stated your position as chair, but you also stated that it was your own personal private citizen remark, but it would cause a lot of confusion. So Sherry, I did state that we had reached consensus to recommend full funding. But again, it was difficult because David, you are the chair and I'm a member.
But was it mentioned about the levy? Because that was only half of it.
Yeah, and I mentioned that we had agreed on up to $2 million, that if necessary, there was consensus to fully fund and to raise a levy if necessary up to $2 million. So I did state that, but again, it was difficult because it would, so I think I agree with Member McMillan that we should agree on how that's going to be relayed and make sure that is relayed consistently every time when we take votes to make recommendations to council.
Okay. Councilmember Newsma, you had your hand up.
If I may,
unless it's left over from before, or
I'll just
go ahead, Councilmember Wright.
I just want to jump in here really quick because I had one thing to add as far as our work plan. One thing that I would really like to see this committee focus on. I mean, we know we have tons of debt and tons of issues, and we need to get a better handle of that. And I feel like that's the direction we're going, which is great. I fully agree with it. But I think in addition, just with the understanding that we know that we have, you know, $400 million of outstanding debt between infrastructure, pensions, the whole gambit. I want this committee to focus on revenue and think about new streams of revenue that are, you know, that are progressive, that you know, we avoid increases in property taxes and all of those things. And I'd really like this committee to at some point really talk about new revenue that the city can look at for the 2024 budget.
Okay. And some of that could come out of sort of the long-term planning sort of view of, what's,
Yeah.
And
where
what
do
I
we,
was
where do
going
we
to add
stand?
here is, with
Go ahead.
with respect to how does this committee communicate to council, we explicitly talked about this in our last meeting. We were having a conversation. We asked ourselves, do we need to vote? What happens if we vote? If you all recall, we noted to ourselves last time we met that there were 5 council members on the committee. So it's not as if the council was ignorant of the discussion at finance and budget. And then Councilmember Kelly did report to the 4 members not on the committee what was going on. So that communication happened. Was it institutionalized? Was it formalized? No. And so moving forward, let's focus on setting up a system for finance and budget to report regularly to council, and or for council to have more regular visibility into the city's financial affairs. We have the monthly reports that Hitesh is publishing, and they're online. It's all there, but we don't talk about them even at this committee. Maybe that's something we need to do on a monthly basis, is review our finances year to date. And if we want to flag any issues, then there's a mechanism in place to report those to council. I'm not looking to create busy work, and we just need to check some boxes and create yet another agenda item for city council if there's nothing important that we need to bring to the council's attention. And I would like to, the conversation should include setting up some regular mechanisms for reporting.
Agree. Okay. So it sounds like we agree that for now, at least, with maybe some view in the future about additional revenue, that these are 5 areas that the group believes if we make progress on them, we would have fundamental improvement in the financial process for the city. And we broke these up to sort of spread the work around among the council members as well as the community members. So I think that hopefully people are still comfortable with their name that's indicated on those 5 points. One thing I could do is over the next week, and then maybe the week after New Year's, reach out to the people that are on each of these subcommittees. There was a bit of a work plan that I worked on as additional work under the bullet. We could talk about those more and say, are these the major steps that we think would make sense to understand more for these 5 major topics? And then at the same time, Mr. Desai could think about who is the city partner for each of these 5 areas, so that then a 3-person group, 2 members of this committee and a member from the city, can start really getting into more specifics on how we make progress on those 5 points. So that's what I think we have consensus on. Don't need to vote on it or anything. I agree we can improve on the communication and how we relay what a consensus is coming out of the group. But for now, it appears we at least have consensus on what the major 5 areas are, and we can work to try to make progress on those between meetings, but definitely in the first half of 23 and as we go into next year's budget discussions. So I think
Can I add just one more
sure.
quick thing? Can we as a group decide at the end of this meeting what will be in the agenda for the next meeting? I know we've done that, but just make sure so that if there is something relevant or something timely, we do have it on the agenda.
Would it be right to have at the end of this meeting, or you could communicate it to Mr. Desai and maybe copy me on what we want to? I think things can come up during the month. It's hard right now to say exactly what that agenda is for the next meeting, but happy to have input. I think we need to stay as focused as we can, right? And these 5 points are pretty broad. If other things come up, we can work them in, but it is making progress on these 5 points, which have a lot of subpoints, is obviously would be very beneficial. So,
I'm
and
sorry, one last thing.
sure.
Councilman Nusma, I sorry if I mispronounced it. We did work on like a 3-page financial 4-page with Hitesh to make it really easy, very high level. And we were going to present it a couple meetings ago, but maybe in the next few months we could present it. But I do agree that if we spend maybe 15 minutes every meeting going through it, it kind of shows the averages last year, this year. And if something really sticks out, we can get an explanation as a group.
Okay. All right. And then Member McMillan, do you have your hand up?
Sorry, that was old.
Old hand up. Okay, very good. All right. I think that's all of our discussion points for this evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I don't know where everyone stands on the Fleetwood Jordan, but there's been a lot of press on it. And I think that that's something that we should probably at least discuss or find out more information about it. Because every time I look in a paper, there's something about it. So.
I fully agree. I received a good number of communications from residents really upset. So let's at least agree to have that on the next agenda while it's a very current topic right now. And we're talking huge sums of money that, you know, haven't been budgeted. So I think this absolutely should be brought before Finance and Budget. It should have been brought, in my opinion, before Finance and Budget earlier on. So I would like to ask if we could at least have that as one of the items for January meeting.
Okay. And Councilmember Nusma.
Before we move on, since we have staff on the phone, would it be worthwhile to go through our list of 5 items on our work plan and make sure we have a city the staff partner assigned to each one?
I mean, Councilmember Newsma, I mean, if I look at these things, I mean, it's all of kind of go through the budget team and we can work and assign that. It is hard. The 5th item, which is kind of a mix of 2 things for the finance side, would be handled more by the finance or the budget. And in terms of capital projects and their timeline and deadline, it would be Lara Biggs would be the point person for the 5th item. But otherwise, I see the pensions, debt, all those kind of things. I mean, we do it in finance, so I cannot assign someone outside of these 3 people here at least. And then, yes, once you send it to me and Clayton or Jess, and we can accordingly decide, because we collectively review the numbers, look at it, and kind of come up with the.
So, are we? If we're penciling in a name, are we penciling in your name, Hitesh, and you'll take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, you can put in my name or put the budget team for the first 4 items. I mean, all those. Yeah, and the 5th item would be Lara Biggs and budget.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Just
right.
one last thing before we go. I just want to thank staff. You guys I really didn't know much about the budget. You've spent a lot of time educating us, and thank you, David, for leading us this year. So just wanted to.
Very good. All right. So I will reach out to everyone in a sort of subgroup, and let's try to at least talk through the section that you're on, okay, and the subpoints that have been identified, and how we can make progress. And I'll reach out to everyone before the next meeting. But somehow we've got to find a way to make progress in between in between meetings, and I think also prioritize these 5 points. Okay. All right. Very good. So I think with that, we are adjourned.
And congratulations on passing the budget.
Yeah.
To the councilman. So.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye.